everyone. I am Bahata Ansumali, a researcher of IndusScript and Indus Civilizations languages from India. I cordially thank the government of Sindh, Pakistan and the Sindhi Language Authority for organizing such a great seminar and for giving me the opportunity to present my research on IndusScript and Indus Civilizations languages. As I show in my next slides, my approach to decoding the IndusScript is very much aligned with the focus of the seminar that insightfully combines the study of language as a source of indigenous knowledge and heritage with the study of an ancient script. My research that was published in the Nature Publishing Group journal in 2019 has categorically proven that the IndusScript was written by signs which were meaning units or word units, not sound units. This statement makes more than 90% of the claimed decipherments provably wrong, as they try to read words of the speculated languages by treating IndusScript signs as phonograms. So the signs should not be treated as with the speculated sound values as phonograms to join them as to spell out words, but rather their actual meaning should be explored so that they can be combined to form phrases. So when I say that IndusScript did not phonetically encode words, people often get a bit disappointed. Many people think that this means that IndusScript will not provide us with any important information about our prehistory. But according to me, it is a good news. This is because IndusScript inscriptions are generally very brief, as their average length is less than 5 signs. Thus, if they were phonetic in nature, they could have encoded just a few names of ancient people, places, and deities. Generally, we get very less information from such names. Even the types of languages spoken is often not easily understood by decoding such proper nouns. On the other hand, when we have different symbols as signs, by decoding them, we can get access to the cognitive world of the ancient people, since different signs might have emerged from different types of technological, religious, and secular cultural symbolism. Each sign, when decoded, can tell a very different story about different aspects of the prehistoric civilization of our ancestors. Now, what types of meanings were conveyed in IndusScript? Interestingly, a semasiographic script like IndusScript, which conveys meanings by ideographs or sematographs, can benefit from linguistic studies. But before explaining this further, let us briefly discuss the semantic scope of the script. Another of my articles published in 2023 in a Nature Group journal argues that Indus inscriptions used on seals and tablets were mainly used to encode certain rules and information related to taxation, commercial licensing, and other types of commercial administrative systems. Since there is only 15 minutes for this presentation, I shall very briefly discuss some evidences substantiating my claims in the next slides. Then I shall discuss how my decodings of certain Indus signs and sign classes has benefited from analyzing ancient languages and symbolisms using linguistic words. Now, the archaeological context of Indus inscriptions indicate their use in taxation. Seals were often found concentrated in places where taxations of commodities took place. For example, archaeologists have argued that incoming and outgoing commodities were measured and taxed at the city gates of fortified Indus settlements. They have established that standardized Indus weights have been mainly used for taxation, and Indus seals were found concentrated near those city gates of Harappa with such weights. Similarly, seals and weights were often found concentrated near workshop areas such as the big factory of Chanudaro, where taxes were possibly collected on the manufactured commodities. Seals were usually stamped on clay tags attached to commodity packages to provide commodity-specific taxation and licensing information. Many such sealings were found in a warehouse of a port city called Lothal, where a commodity control was possibly quite important. Even today, various standardized commodity-specific symbols are found to be stamped on merchandise packages. Now, in certain buildings identified as public offices and administrative centers also, seals and weights have been found together. Possibly such seals and weights were used in collecting taxation, taxes, and issuing commercial licenses in such administrative offices. You see, in this ancient building, even a bench was there to accommodate people waiting outside the public office. Now, also regarding certain inscribed Kanme tablets, the Professor Toshiki Osada and his colleagues have actually conjectured that these were perforated kind of tokens or gate passes. So these inscriptions, a walking man with a kind of implement at his waist, preceded by a strokes numeral sign. These are possibly certain gate access control related licensing information encoded. And also, identical or similar inscriptions were often found in inscriptions of distant settlements, the way identical standardized weights were found in those settlements, indicating that the rules encoded in InduScript were possibly commercial rules standardized across settlements. The local socio-political rules of those settlements might have quite differed. Then inscribed indus have never been found inside grave goods, indicating they were possibly not meant for personal or religious use, but they're issued by certain organizations and authorities. Then the abrupt cessation in the usage of inscribed indus seals and tablets, actually after the dissolution of IBC Sarvan centers, can be compared to the demise of the inscribed Bala taxation tablets of ancient Mesopotamia, which were integrally related to the rotational taxation system of the Ur III state. And when the Ur III state were dissolved under the attack of, say, Matu tribes and Elam, possibly when that collapsed, their administrative system also collapsed, and those taxation tablets were not there anymore. Similarly, I think when the decline of Indus civilization happened, it wiped out IBC's large-scale organized trade and related taxation and trade controlling devices such as seals, weights, and tablets. And if these were actually religious, magical religious amulets, then given the inertia of religious practices, they must have continued. Similarly, if they really encoded names of seal owners or places of those merchandise origin and destination, those should have been continued in the local trades. But because these were taxation, licensing, etc., related information, when the state or the different city states and their systems collapsed, then those inscriptions also disappeared. There are various scriptinal evidences of the InduScript's semasiographic and commercial nature. The use of numerical signs is one of them. Often numerals of different numbers of strokes occurred before specific signs you see here. And I have argued that these stroke signs were actually commodity specific tax rates and trade or craft specific license fees, which were encoded in the tax stamps and license tablets. So the way only a few standardized tax rates are now presently applicable in modern economies, and only a few standardized numerals also occurred before specific signs, which are possibly names of commodities, crafts, and taxes. For certain commodity signs, actually only a fixed numerals was used. For example, this long bast fiber plant related possibly signs, which I have published in another article. So they are often only preceded by 3-stroke numerals, which are possibly those commodity specific tax rates. Then while the stamp seals were used as tax stamps, the inscribed tablets were actually commercial licenses related to those tax stamps. Thus, the obverse side inscriptions of the seals and the tablets were often very similar or identical, but the tablets had a distinct type of reverse side inscriptions found, which where only 2, 3, 4, or 6 stroke numerals appeared before a rimless jar-like sign. You can see here. And I have argued that the rimless jar-like sign possibly represented a volumetric meteorological unit and corresponding standardized capacity vessel used in license fee collection. Thus, it possibly metonymically encoded license collection, and the strokes before it were encoded certain standardized license slabs. So in my Nature Group journal articles, I have also shown how different segments of Indus inscriptions, Indus inscriptions are very formulaic, and the different segments contain signs from different functional or semantic classes, and how they convey different categories of information. For example, the terminal signs are possibly names of taxes and license types. The core informational segment possibly encoded names of tax commodities and license crafts. paragraphs, and the numerals represent preceding the tax names and commodity or craft names are possibly tax rates or license rates, and the pre-terminals or pre-phrased final symbols were possibly commodity type used for tax payment, etc. I have elaborately argued why I make those conjectures in my paper. Now, if in this schematic diagram I have shown the basic mechanism through which the industrials have conveyed meaning using their inscriptions and iconography. So this animal-based iconography was possibly used as an emblem of the issuing authority of the seal. Possibly merchant or artisan guilds or regional rulers or governing bodies issued such seals. And this, you see name of tax, commodity and related craft or trade, possibly here task-like sign, possibly encoded ivory. Now this is commodity specific tax rate, possibly, or tax specific rate, and this plant-based commodity used as mode of tax payment, possibly, which is the reason there was a related tax name and it was used in the terminal part. And we can compare these structures and semantics with modern tax stamps, also mentioning tax rates, tax commodities, tax types, etc. Only that in modern stamps those are normally encoded in phonetically written words. I shall now show how languages are actually important for decoding the semasiographic indescript. Interestingly, the same symbols are often encoded in words of ancient languages, and the pictographic graphemes of the semasiographic script, as I say, name of this seminar suggests languages can be perceived as sources of indigenous language knowledge and heritage. Thus, when our modern minds fail to recognize the ancient symbolisms used in undeciphered script signs, we can actually check etymologies for various linguistic words which are possibly related to those symbolism, and they still carry some of the symbolism invented thousands of years ago. Thus, when the material remains of archaeology cannot help us in decoding a symbol, linguistic words might sometimes provide us with the missing links. I shall give you a few examples in the next slides. So, analyzing script internal patterns and graphemic features, archaeological evidence and historical evidence, I had conjectured that the terminal symbols of IndoScript, which either look like certain metrological tools or otherwise look like certain crop livestock symbols, like were actually names of taxes and licenses. However, to prove that point, I needed linguistic corroboration whether ancient names of taxes or licenses were really coined using metrological nouns and names of commodities related to those nouns. And very interestingly, ancient taxes were actually named using mainly such metrology and commodity related nouns, and we have found such actually ancient words which were also names of volumetric units or length-based units, and then there were lengths of those kind of tools like standardized capacity vessels of representing those units, or say ropes. And then because certain taxes were measured using such vessels or ropes and all, those taxes were named after them. In ancient India, like drona is a similar word. In ancient or Rajju for land surveying, then land tax was named after Rajju, and then land tax collected was called Rajju Gahaka Macha. Drunamaka was another name of a tax collector. Then in ancient Mesopotamia, Sutu is a similar word which had given names to taxes, tax collectors, etc. It was a meteorological noun and a name of a vessel. Similarly, in ancient Egypt, we see rope based words used for tax names of land surveyors and similar taxes. And so from this linguistic words, we can actually get corroboration for our epigraphic conjectures. And similarly, in my presentation in the last seminar, I have actually discussed how I decoded the pushable blowpipe based symbol for precious metal and goldsmithing in Indus civilization, IndoScript, and how as related Ratti or Abras Precatoria seed based symbol was used for gold measuring unit, and how they were actually engraved on certain goldsmiths tools found on Mohenjo-daro Interestingly, crucible blowpipes have been traditionally used in metalsmithy and especially goldsmithy. So, starting from ancient Egyptian, reliefs to various old historical Indian paintings, or even some contemporary pictures, we can see that goldsmiths are still shown with crucibles and blowpipes traditionally. And this is a reason in ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, the ideograms of a man blowing into a crucible was used for goldsmithing and metalsmithing and related words. Similarly, in Akkadian language, the words for blowing and then blowpipe and bellow was also used for words for metalsmithy. In Sumerian script, we can see a similar pictogram involving a person handling a furnace with blowpipes and tubers to encode metalsmithy words. And in various ancient Indian words of Dravidian or Indo-Aryan languages, we have such words like Mayaka or Narindhamaru or Komukaru, which all have the etymology or Udu etymology related to blowpipe based words. And then as a blowpipe blower, goldsmith is described in all these words, or metalsmiths are described. So in here also we get direct linguistic corroboration for our epigraphic conjecture or made on archaeological, graphemic and historical evidences. Now, why did so many ancient scripts prefer symbolic signs over phonetic letters? Actually, when you have as your audience of your writing, if you have a lot of people from different linguistic backgrounds or script background, but if they have an understanding of certain standardized symbolism, then you might want to use symbols rather than phonetically encoded words to write certain ideas. And also, if you have a space constraint, like if you have to write a lot of information on a seal stamp, you might go for symbols of those words, not their spellings. And also, when you have to encode proper nouns, then you might have need of phonetic encoding. But say like a traffic symbol like domain, where you know that only a limited set of ideas or words have to be communicated and have to be rapidly processed by literate and illiterate people, then you might also want to go by symbols. So I think because Indus civilization was encompassing a huge area of 1 million square kilometer or more, and must have been multilingual. So for them, since they were also encoding only the commercial information through the Indus script that we see today, and they were writing on miniature seals and tablets which had space constraint, they logically used or preferred, I think, symbolic meaning symbol based writing rather than phonetically encoded words. So this actually concludes my talk, and I am very fortunate to know various scholars of Pakistan like Amar Fayaz Buriro, Professor Ishaq Shamejo, and some Brahui speaking scholars also, with whom I can sometimes discuss various linguistic aspects of Indus script. And so if needed, so I think our countries will continue to jointly cherish and explore our glorious common past. Thank you for listening to me.